and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 568, and today's date is January 16th, 2015, and the title of this episode is Countries Are Isolating Themselves as the Private Western Central Banking System Collapses. Let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand out in Greece, the snap elections are coming up January 25th. The people in Greece, very, very nervous. They started taking a lot of their cash out of the banks. And as we know, back in December, about $3 billion has been withdrawn from the system. Now, there are two banks there that kind of running out of cash. And these banks have requested emergency liquidity assistance. Now, we saw this back in 2011 when Greece was having major problems. And, of course, the central bankers stepped in and they gave them loans. And then they gave them more loans and they gave more loans. And here we are today. And, of course, everything they've done did not work for Greece. Actually, it made it 10 times worse. And we also understand a lot of people are not paying their taxes in Greece. And we can see right now that banks are actually seeing bank runs because they need to continually add more and more cash to the system because a lot of people are taking it out and things are starting to crash and fall apart there. And we're going to have to see what happens on January 25th if they actually leave the euro or they stay with the euro and they write off a lot of their debt. And we can see a lot of countries are looking at Greece to see what they're going to do because they might just follow. I mean, we see Iceland, who had an application into the Eurozone, is saying, you know what? I don't think we're going to join at this point. And we're seeing a lot of countries starting to isolate themselves and step away from the private Western central banking system because they realize this entire system is falling apart. It is not getting better, and they don't want to be a part of this. And a lot of these countries, and you have to remember, if we go back in the reports, they have been protecting themselves. They have made bilateral security agreements with China, where they bring in reserve currency of the yuan renminbi. And we can see they are getting prepared to drop the dollar, drop the euro when it is time. And we can see a lot of the countries right now are saying, you know what, we better do this at this point before things get worse. Now, here in the United States, we understand the government, all they have is the illusionary numbers, the stock market, the suppressing of gold and silver and other precious metals. We also understand they manipulate these statistical numbers. This is all they have because the real economy is completely separating from their illusion. And we can see that a lot of the people still believe that we are in a recovery. Yes, some are waking up and they're saying something's wrong, but they have hope because the president, the government, the central bank, they're continually telling them things are getting better, believe us. And they're brainwashing them over and over and over. And in the corporate media, all you see is continually brainwashing the people with the economy's doing great. All the statistical numbers look fantastic, so just believe us. And we can see by the UMich consumer sentiment, it surged to 98.2, smashing the expectations of 94.1 by the most in 2 years. This is the highest sentiment since February 2004. This all seems very odd, especially in the light of how the holidays went. The retail sales were awful. People didn't have the money to go out and spend, but people believe. They believe their salary is going to go up. They believe they're going to get this better job. They believe they're going to sell their house. I mean, if we look at the statistics, 55.2%, they believe they're going to get higher wages in the next year. 54% of Americans think it is a good time to sell their home. And yeah, it might be because prices are still up there, but they're coming down very quickly. And we're starting to see that people are having a very hard time selling their house. I believe that times where you sold your house kind of passed. We saw this back in 2007, 2008, where there was a point where everything was fine and then it came to a screeching halt and people just couldn't sell their homes anymore, and the prices started to drop. We are seeing that now. Now, people are going to put their houses up for sale, And they're going to wonder, why isn't my house selling? They're telling me everything is great. People are buying. What's going on here? And I looked around the country once again, and I'm seeing houses on the market 60, 90, 120 days. People are lowering their prices $50,000, $75,000. They can't move their homes. But, of course, the corporate media, the government is telling them that everything is fine. They're even telling them that there's no inflation whatsoever. Everything, all the prices are just going down. And we see that the consumer prices have tumbled, most in 6 years. There's a 0.4% drop, slightly worse than expected. This is the biggest monthly drop since December of 2008. The drop is led by a 9.4% collapse month on month in gasoline. Now, we understand that, which brings a lot of things down in price. But when we look closer and we look at food, food is a really great indicator. Because, and I'm not talking about the box food, all the chemical stuff where they can just create that out of thin air. I'm talking about natural food, meats, things that you just can't manipulate in any way. The food index rose 0.3% in December and after a 0.2% increase in November. Fruits and vegetables rose 0.4%. Fresh vegetables increased by 2.4%. Meats, poultry, fish, and eggs increased by 0.3%. And beef and veal continued to rise, advancing by 0.7%. So what does this tell us? Yes, maybe TVs are coming down in price. Maybe gasoline is being suppressed and being brought down in price. But we are seeing food going up during this time period. And this is what people eat. This is what people need. Now we see there are more and more layoffs going on here. And this is going to mean more people are going to be out of work. This means retail sales are going to hurt. We see Schlumberger Ltd. Oil Field Services, 9,000 people. Bombardier, 1,000. Suncor Energy, 1,000. Zoosk, that dating service website, 15% of the employees. Bye-bye. We're seeing companies tell us that their revenues have decreased. They're falling and they're imploding. Intel, Best Buy. Many of these companies are coming out saying, hey, our revenues are just not there. 3 of the largest U.S. banks reported falling profits and revenue below analyst estimates. But of course, what do we see out in the corporate media? And this is coming out of Bloomberg. U.S. retakes helm of global economy. And this is all they have. They have statistical numbers, and this is what they're going to use. Whatever they get from the government, they're going to spin it to make it look like the economy's doing well. And this is exactly what they're doing. The U.S. is back in the driver's seat of the global economy after 15 years of watching China and emerging markets take the lead. The world's biggest economy will expand by 3.2% or more this year. Yes, when we manipulate the numbers. Its best performance since at least 2005. As improving job markets lead to stepped-up consumer spending, well, where are they getting this from? The job market is dead. People are getting retail, waitressing, waiters, bartenders. From this holiday season, the best time of the year. It didn't happen, but they're spinning this. It's amazing. They went on to say, in the latest sign of Americans' resurgence, the Labor Department reported January 9th that payrolls rose to 252,000 in December as the unemployment rate dropped to 5.6%. It's the lowest since June of 2008. You mean when things were going well right before the crash? This tells us they're just using the statistical numbers that are completely manipulated, and they're just spinning it any way they want. And people are believing this. People are trying to sell their house, and they're wondering and scratching their heads. People are sending resumes out saying this is a great time to switch jobs. And they cannot switch jobs because no one's replying to the resumes. And everyone's going, why is this? The U.S. is breaking away from the rest of the world, partly because it has more success working off the debt-driven excesses. Really? Well, how much debt has been added to the U.S. government since Obama took office? Actually, each president. But $7.5 trillion? We're going to hit $20 trillion by the end of his term? This is unbelievable. This is why people are stuck in this illusionary world. And they're shocked. Just like in 2008 when everything comes crashing down. They don't understand what just happened. Everyone just told us back in 2008, the government, the Fed, subprime is contained, real estate had a small little blip, but prices will be going back up, sales will be increasing. We're not forecasting any type of recession whatsoever. Everything looks fantastic in the year 2008 going forward. Everyone just keep doing what you're doing, and there's nothing to worry about. We're seeing the same thing happen right now. This is what they're doing. And already I see in the corporate media, a lot of the corporate media is out there saying, hey, beware. The end of the falling gas prices is now in sight. It looks like gas prices might be going up. This is what I see reporting all in the financial networks. That yes, they've tried by suppressing the gas prices. It didn't work with Russia. It didn't help the holiday season. Basically, it did absolutely nothing. Actually, it hurt a lot more than it helped. Yes, people might be filling up their cars and it might be better for them, but did it really put more money in your pocket? Did it really help that much? Or would you rather get a better salary? Would you rather have a better job? That would be better. But of course, everything they did didn't work. Now, we see out in Switzerland, we see they completely took the franc and depegged against the euro. The Swiss National Bank promised that it would defend the euro-Swiss franc currency peg with the utmost determination. But on Thursday, the central bank shocked the financial world by abruptly abandoning it. But now that it looks like the EU is going to launch a very robust quantitative easing program, the Swiss National Bank has thrown in the towel. They saw what was coming. They knew what was coming, and they said, you know what? As they introduced quantitative easing, because you have to remember, in principle, the court said yes, they can create money out of thin air. They knew the currency, the euro, was going to take a dive. They knew their currency, the franc, would take a dive. So they depegged. It was simply going to cost way too much to continue to defend the currency floor. So now there is a panic all over Europe. As things in Europe continue to get even worse, expect the euro to go to all-time record lows. The Swiss economy will rapidly fall into recession as a result of the SNB move. This is what all the economists are saying. Actually, I'm going to say that their economy will probably thrive now. The Swiss stock market has been blasted. The currency is nearly 20% higher than it was a day before. Most experts are calling this an extremely bad move by the Swiss National Bank. Actually, it's probably the opposite. Didn't they say it was a terrible move in Iceland when they got rid of the bankers and they detached themselves from the private Western central banking system? Well, look how their economy is doing. It is doing fantastic. So we can see right now they're building the propaganda that it's going to be terrible, but actually it's going to be a lot better. And when other countries see this, they're going to say, you know what, it's our time. We need to isolate ourselves. We need to detach from the private Western central bank system. We cannot be involved anymore. They said the euro is falling apart and the Swiss did not want to be married to it any longer. For many of those that live in Switzerland but work in neighboring countries, what happened on Thursday was fantastic for them. Peter Schiff was out there. By ending its 3-year currency peg to the weakening euro, Switzerland has become the first major economy to surrender in the international currency war, and in so doing has given a long-delayed victory to the Swiss people. Contrary to whatever all the economists, the central bankers are saying, the corporate media, the financial establishment, the decision is not a disaster for Switzerland. A continuance of an open-ended peg to the euro could have ultimately ruined the country. Its surprise move, perhaps prompted by the European Central Bank, recently announced intentions to unleash its own quantitative easing program may be looked at in the future as the first significant counterattack against our global system of monetary insanity. So we can see right now, this was probably a very smart move. And I wouldn't be surprised if other countries decide to follow as time goes on. Now, of course, there is an increased demand for gold following the SNB move. The IMF, Christine Lagarde, is out there. I am shocked that they did not contact me when they were going to do this. Why would they do that? Makes no sense. The Swiss franc has added more than 15% against the euro after the Swiss National Bank dropped a 3-year-old limit that capped the currency value at 1.2% against the euro. The bank said in a statement that the cap introduced in September 2011 protected the Swiss economy from serious harm, but it isn't necessary any longer. Quantitative easing in Europe would immediately devalue the euro against other currencies. And this is pretty much why they were leaving, and we can see all of this is kind of a dress rehearsal for the dollar. There is more fallout to come. Just keep in mind, this will happen when the dollar rises, for there is even a larger short dollar position around the globe. But what we have seen in Swiss will be the dress rehearsal for the dollar. And we can see right now that countries are looking at the entire system. I mean, look at Greece right now. They're looking at China. They're looking at Russia, making deals with them. Europe is looking at the entire situation, saying these sanctions are killing us. France wanted to move away. They wanted to end the sanctions. They didn't want to get involved with the Islamic State war. They had enough. Their economy is hurting. Italy, the same thing. Spain, the same thing. But what are the central bankers doing? What are the U.S. government doing? They're bringing them back in. They're controlling them. Because the private Western central bank countries, they need war to cover up this entire collapse. Does this mean that we're not going to have the collapse? Absolutely not. It just means they're going to blame it on someone else. That's all that is happening right now. Now, we understand that the U.S. government central bankers have been basically trying to brainwash the next generation. And we talked about freedom of speech. We talked about the Fourth Amendment, the Second Amendment, all our rights that we're born with. And we can see with Common Core, they were trying to convince everyone that you do not have rights. You have privileges and the government can take them away at any time. They were dumbing down the next generation to be good workers, not to think, not to have ideas, because that's all they want. They just want good workers who do the job and don't think. Well, as more and more states begin to reject and propose bills against Common Core standards, new legislation has been released which could cause an end to the controversial education system of Common Core. Senator Lamar Alexander is the new chairman of the Senate Education Committee, and he has released 2 options to replace the education system. One replacement plan would have standardized requirements for math and reading between grades 3 to 8, while the other option offers states the choice to test annually or every 3 years to see how they are performing. The second option, according to the Times, would allow each state to choose which standardized test to administer to their students. Whether or not the state chooses to move forward with the Common Core standards would therefore be left up to the state. Now, our founding fathers, they wanted the education system, the local police system, to be left to individual states, towns, counties. Because the people in the small communities, they knew what was best. And I hate to say this, but the parents of these children, they know what they want. They know they want their children to have a good education. This is why a lot of parents, a lot of teachers are out there, they are objecting to this Common Core because it makes no sense. They realize it's dumbing down the next generation. And this is what they said. They didn't want the federal government to get involved with this. They didn't want the federal government controlling all the states and the education system with money. Because what does this allow them to do? It allows them to control the masses, just like they're controlling the money, the corporate media, and now the internet. They're trying to control everything. And as we talk about the internet, the White House has dropped a bombshell on Thursday by announcing that the FCC already has the authority to take over regulating and taxing the internet without Congress whatsoever. Basically what they want to do, and of course President Obama is using the case of net neutrality, and that's just his cover for we want to take control of the internet and make it a public utility and issue licenses and tax everyone and control it just like we do the corporate media. That's what he wants to do. This is the game plan because, like I said, they need to control the creation of money, the flow of information, and that includes the internet. That is their main problem at this point, and they're trying to control it. And we see Europe right now, they're creating these draconian laws that actually limit free speech, that actually limit what you can do on the internet or what you can say. A lot of these countries now are creating these laws that if you do violate them, you can go to jail. And they decide what is hate speech. They decide what can be said or what can't be said. They decide what you can see or what you can't see. So right now, you can see they're trying to control everything. Now, as we know, we had this false flag event happen in Paris. And we see that people are scared, groups are scared, and we see the Jewish people are making a very big deal. And I have nothing against the Jewish people. I have nothing against Catholic people. I have nothing against Muslim people. But I find this very interesting, that the biggest Jewish association in the EU has called on lawmakers in Brussels to let Jewish people carry guns for protection because of what happened with the terrorists. Now, I believe this should be with everybody, not just with one group. I mean, think about what they're saying. We have more and more terrorism. Our governments are telling us that terrorism is everywhere. Lone wolves, everyone should be scared. We need to spy on you. We need to pat you down. Wouldn't it be a better idea if you gave all the people weapons and they just protect themselves? Think about how everything else would go down. If all those people inside the deli or inside any one of these locations where the terrorists were holding them hostage, they picked out their guns and they pointed it at the terrorists, what do you think would happen? All of a sudden, we'd have a complete change of what was going on at that point. Because you don't know if the terrorist was going to kill you or not. Now, of course, as we know, this was a false flag event. I'm just using this and saying this, that when we look at certain towns that have very relaxed gun laws and people can carry them around, crime is very low. And we can see right now that this is a great idea. If we're so worried about terrorism coming after us, it is a great idea for every single person to protect themselves. Because as we can see, the government can't, even though they're telling us they're continually needing to spy, to pat us down, to limit our free speech. Basically, none of this is working, so we need to have weapons. Now, yesterday I talked about this device called ShotSpotter, and these are microphones that they place all over the place between buildings, and we see a lot of towns, cities getting involved with this. And this system detects gunshots, and it alerts the police and triangulates where this is happening. And I was thinking about this, and yesterday I talked about that they can change the microphones where they can listen in on conversations, triangulate where people are, and they're definitely going to use this. But I can see this device actually not working, because there's a very easy way to kind of fool what is going on here and send the police to a location where nothing is happening. Let's say someone has fireworks and they start setting them off in a certain area. The police then are going to run over there and try to find out what was going on. And at the meantime, there's a crime going on someplace else. So I can see how this whole system can be fooled. Now, they might have some filters on there where it say, okay, this is not a gunshot, or maybe it is, and they might be able to determine it. But right now, between a firework and a gunshot, depending on where it is and how far away it is, they might not be able to tell, and the police might be just running around all over town. Now, out in Ukraine, we understand the economy is collapsing. The people are having a very hard time out there. War is still going on. The ceasefire really did not work, and we can see there's a huge amount of troop buildup at this time. And we can see that 30% of the Ukrainians didn't have enough money to pay their utility bills last month. This is how hard it is for these people in this area. And we can see they're in the middle of winter at this time, and it's getting harder and harder as time goes on. Now, we understand that the Donetsk people and Kiev, they've been meeting in Minsk, but guess what? Kiev didn't show up. They just didn't come there. And we can see that the Donetsk people showed up, the OSCE showed up, and Kiev did not show up to the Minsk talks to talk about peace and how they're going to work out the situation and how they're going to move forward. So when you hear the corporate media out there saying, Russia needs to stop this, Russia has to de-escalate the situation, actually, it's the opposite. They're not showing up to the talks. They're not getting involved. Instead, what are they doing? They're building up their troops. They're training their troops. That's what they're busy doing because they're mounting an offensive. They're getting ready. Now, we understand in the Donetsk area, there's an airport, and they've been fighting over this airport. There's a huge amount of shelling in this area. Now, Kiev troops are claiming that they still control the area. The southeastern people in Ukraine are saying, no, we control the area now. So at this point, I don't see who controls it. And we can see right now they're both still in the area. Shelling is continuing. Actually, the Donetsk people are saying, I believe that the Kiev government has been using chemical weapons on us. The head of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic, Alexander, and I'm going to try to pronounce his name, Zakharchenko, said that Kiev troops have used chemical munitions during the attacks on the Donetsk airport. And we've seen this before, where the U.S. government central bankers had the Free Syrian Army use sarin gas on the people of Syria, where the Free Syrian Army used chlorine, where the Islamic State, which is the proxy army, used chlorine gas on the people of Syria. We've seen it before in Ukraine, where they used white phosphorus, where they used chemical weapons. They said after these shells burst, a pungent cloud of gas spread across the old terminal. And they said it smelt like sulfur. Basically, maybe they were trying to make the whole place smelly and try to get everyone to leave that area. They said there was a pungent smell, and they see bursts of smoke in the air, and it was impossible to breathe. So you can see what they were trying to do at this point. And of course, what they're saying is that this breaches the Geneva Convention. This type of munition is completely banned, and they cannot be using it. But of course they do. They don't care. The Russian OSCE ambassador is saying there is absolutely no proof substantiating Kiev's allegations about the presence of Russian troops. And we've seen this before in the past, where they were telling us that Russia was invading continually. They have tanks in there. They're all over the place. Planes are flying in, helicopters, and absolutely nothing. Putin came out and introduced a peace plan, the Minsk peace plan, which Kiev is not showing up to because they don't want peace. Actually, they took this time to build up the troops. They're getting the lethal weapons into the country. So you can see exactly what they're doing. Poroshenko is out there, and he's saying that the Ukrainian army is regrouping in the east of the country and additional forces are being moved in. The troops regrouping is now underway and additional units are being moved into force for reconstitution at the most dangerous spots. All of this alarms us, Lavrov says, and he's from Russia. I hope that Kiev will resort to common sense, and President Poroshenko will not yield to attempts of the war party to sabotage the Minsk agreements. Well, he's already sabotaging it. He's all ready to go. He's ready to push the offensive, to go to war. You can see they're definitely getting ready. Now, all over the corporate media, they're spinning how Russia has shut off the gas supplies, that they've shut everything down and they want war. Well, Putin has been warning about this for a very long time. This is nothing new. We talked about this. What was he trying to do? Well, he understands that in Ukraine, the United States government central bankers had a coup. They threw out the elected government. They put the bankers in place. They've taken the country and they bankrupt it. They're allowing outside investors come in to invest in the gas pipeline, which feeds into Europe. But guess who's not allowed to invest in there? Russia. Inside of Ukraine, it's unstable. There is war. We understand John Kerry, Joe Biden put their relatives on the board of directors, their friends they went to college with on the board of directors. They're in Ukraine because they're expecting to make a huge profit from this gas pipeline. Putin, as we know, said, listen, I'm creating South Stream, which will go under the Black Sea. And that deal was completely stopped. Why? Because the U.S. government went into Bulgaria and said, listen, do not allow this to happen. Do not allow the pipeline to go through your country. They listened. They wouldn't agree to having the pipeline go through, so Putin said, you know what? We're not going to use the South Stream. We can't do it. It's not going to be allowed. So instead, we will go through Turkey. And we will go up through Greece to all the other countries in Europe. And this is the way it has to be. So what did they do? They're slowly stopping the gas supply through Ukraine and switching it to Turkey. And the Russians are out there and saying, this is very simple. Hook up into this system and you can have all the gas you want. We're just not going through Ukraine at this point. And this was already known. They knew they were doing this, but they thought they stopped them by stopping South Stream, by going to Bulgaria and convincing the leaders there not to do it. And of course, the central bankers, the U.S. government officials who are going to get a handful of money from this are all patting themselves on the back, and all of a sudden this happens. And they're spinning this to make it seem like Russia wants war. Look, he shut off the gas. People are going to freeze. No, they knew this was coming. They have reserves. They've been preparing for this. They knew he was going to switch the gas. They knew what was coming. Because that's why he was building South Stream. But Greece, they're behind this. Greece backs the decision. And they're saying that it's entirely justified. Turkey's fine with it too, because they're going to receive money from it. Greece's willingness to support gas supplies to the country and through it to other European countries is absolutely fine. The Greeks are saying. They're saying that, yes, this is the best way to do it. Actually, Russia is out there saying, listen, if you allow the gas to flow and you drop the food ban on us, we will start purchasing food from you. Greece might just do it. As you can see, they're making business deals away from Europe with China and Russia because they need to create an economy. They need to create jobs. They don't want loans anymore. They don't want debt anymore. And this is exactly what they're doing. Now, as we know, things in the Middle East are completely falling apart. We understand the people are rising up in all these different countries, Yemen, Libya, Iraq, Lebanon, and we can see the UN is trying to stop what is going on in Libya. They're trying to have peace talks, and they're trying to have a unity type of government where the puppet government and the people's government will rule together. And the reason why they want this is because this way the oil, the natural resources, will stay on the US dollar. And this is part of the agreement that, yes, if we go through with this and when there's a unity government, we need to be assured that you're not going to sell the oil not using the dollar. And we can see right now this is exactly what they're trying to do. And the United Nations is saying that the talks are going well. The only difference is, and the only problem is that the representatives from the self-declared government have really stayed away from the talks. So who are they talking to at this time? And we can see right now they're going to continue the talks, but we're going to see later on, and as we've seen in the past, the U.S. government, the central bankers, they never keep their word. And fighting will then resume in this area. They're trying to use this as the first phase to get back into the country. And we're going to have to watch this closely to see how this goes. Now, there was a report in Libya that they suspected a trawler was carrying fuel, and they said they were going to deliver it to the Islamic State. I think the opposite's happening here. I think they were trying to send it out and have different countries purchase the oil, not using the dollar. And we see Libyan warplanes attacked it, and it was hit, and this oil now is not going to be sold anywhere. Now, we see out in Syria, the Pentagon is going to be deploying about 400 plus troops to train the Syrian opposition. And the U.S. military has announced it will send these 400 specialists to train the Syrian opposition as Washington takes its fight against the Assad government. And we can see this is what they're ramping up to do. They're getting ready, they're getting prepared, and they're pushing this as hard as they possibly can. Now, what's very interesting about the Free Syrian Army is that more and more of the opposition forces are basically moving over to the Islamic State. It was reported recently that some 3,000 so-called moderate rebels of the Free Syrian Army had defected to the Islamic State. And of course, they brought all their weapons, their cash, the equipment, and training. And we can see as they train more of these opposition groups, how don't they know that they might kind of defect over to the Islamic State. Now, of course, this might be planned. Maybe this is what they want, and this way they can say, look, the Islamic State is growing. They have more weapons, they have more cash, they have more of everything, and they're maneuvering towards Damascus. Because we can see from the time the Islamic State got into Syria, they have acquired more land, more of Syria. And out of all the bombing that they're doing, the Islamic State is not damaged whatsoever. Actually, they're better off. Because as we know, they are a proxy army of the United States government, Israel, UK, and other countries. Now, Turkey is out there screaming once again that they want a no-fly zone. They need it to protect Aleppo from Assad's forces. And they're pushing for this once again, and they're just trying to figure out how they can get this no-fly zone. They tried many times before. The Islamic State has now captured 3 fighter jets. Well, Assad came in and blew up the fighter jets. Well, that story disappeared. The Islamic State now has captured an airport, and they can get their hands on more fighter jets. Well, the Syrian army came in and took over these air bases. So every time they try, it kind of falls apart. Now, of course, we're seeing these terror attacks all over Europe. Belgium was on high alert Friday after 2 suspected jihadists were killed in police raids. Now, basically what they're doing is they're raiding all these areas where people are coming back from Syria. They're not waiting for them to do something. They're just raiding these areas to capture all these people. This series of raids across the continent highlighted fears about young Europeans traveling to fight holy war with the Islamic State and other extremist groups in the Middle East, and then returning to launch attacks on Western targets. The Belgium officials said they had averted imminent large-scale attacks on police targets after raiding a terror cell in the eastern town of Belgium, near the German border, whose members have recently come back from Syria. So that's all they've been doing. They're breaking down doors, going in there, and yes, people are returning fire because they don't know what's going on. They haven't done anything. They're just doing it. Now, we understand the FBI was out here and they were plotting something on the Capitol. They were using an informant, and the father is out there saying that, the FBI informant set up my son. He had no money. Actually, the informant gave him money to go out and purchase these weapons. But again, he made a legal purchase. He didn't do anything. And we can see that this is entrapment. The FBI has done this time and time again. Now, I was at a friend's house, and I haven't seen them in a long time, and they were all talking about what's going on in the world and the economy and things like that. And they brought up all these different things, how the economy is doing, and how, we're a capitalist society, and how we have freedoms and things like that. And they asked me what I thought, and that was the worst thing they could have done. And I didn't go along with pretty much anything they were saying, and they were looking at me like, what are you talking about? And I started to think about fascism and how our country is sliding closer and closer to a fascistic country. And I went to look, and I see that Dr. Lawrence Britt, he has examined the fascist regimes of Hitler Germany, Italy during Mussolini, Franco in Spain, and others. And let me just read the definition of fascism. A way of organizing a society in which a government ruled by a dictator controls the lives of the people, and which people are not allowed to disagree with the government. Very harsh control or authority. Now, he put together 14 different criteria, indicators that your country is sliding into fascism. Let's see what these are. And you think in your own mind if we are heading this way. And I'll give you my opinion. Fascist regimes tend to make constant use of patriotic mottos, slogans, symbol songs, and other paraphernalia. Flags are seen everywhere, as are flag symbols on clothing and in public displays. 2. Disdain for the recognition of human rights. Because of fear of enemies and the need for security, the people in the fascist regimes are persuaded that human rights can be ignored in certain cases because of need. The people tend to look the other way or even approve of torture, summary executions, assassinations, long incarcerations of prisoners. And we're seeing this here today in the United States. They've come out with the torture report, and people kind of look the other way. Identification of enemies, scapegoats as a unifying cause. The people are rallied into unifying patriotic frenzy over the need to eliminate or perceived common threat or foe. Racial, ethnic, or religious minorities, liberals, communists, socialists, terrorists. Have we seen this? They're building it up. Muslims are bad. Identification of enemies. I'm sorry, I read that one already. Number 4, supremacy of the military. Even when there are widespread domestic problems, the military is given a disproportionate amount of government funding, and the domestic agenda is neglected. Soldiers and military service are glamorized. Number 5, rampant sexism. The government of fascist nations tend to be almost exclusively male-dominated. Under fascist regimes, traditional gender roles are made more rigid. Number 6, controlled mass media. Sometimes the media is directly controlled by the government, but in other cases, the media is indirectly controlled by the government regulation or sympathetic media spokespeople and executives. Censorship, especially in wartime, is very common. Are we seeing this today? Absolutely. 7, obsession with national security. Fear is used as a motivational tool by the government over the masses. Definitely seeing that today. 8, religion and government are intertwined. Governments in fascist nations tend to use the most common religion in the nation as a tool to manipulate public opinion. Number 9, corporate power is protected. The industrial and businesses of a fascist nation often are the ones who put the government leaders into power, creating a mutually beneficial business-government relationship and power elite. We are definitely seeing this. Number 10, labor power is suppressed. Because the organizing power of labor is the only real threat to a fascist government, labor unions are either eliminated entirely or severely suppressed. Definitely seeing that. Disdain for intellectual and the arts. This is number 11. Fascist nations tend to promote and tolerate open hostility to higher education and academia. It is not uncommon for professors and other academics to be censored or even arrested. Free expression in the arts and letters is openly attacked. They're telling us that we have freedom of speech in certain areas, and this is in colleges. 13. Number 12, obsession with the crime and punishment. Under fascist regimes, the police are given almost limitless power to enforce laws. The people are often willing to overlook police abuses and even forego civil liberties in the name of patriotism. There is often a national police force with virtually unlimited power in the fascist nations. They're trying to nationalize the police forces. We're seeing police abuse everywhere. We have DHS, which is bringing the police forces in line to be nationalized. 13, rampant cronyism and corruption. Fascist regimes almost always are governed by groups of friends and associates who appoint each other to government positions and use governmental power and authority to protect their friends from accountability. It is not uncommon in a fascist regime for national resources and even treasures to be appropriated or even outright stolen by government leaders. We are definitely seeing that today. 14. Fraudulent elections. Sometimes elections in the fascist nations are a complete sham. Other times elections are manipulated by smear campaigns against or even assassinations of opposition candidates, use of legislation to control voting numbers or political district boundaries, and manipulation of the media. Fascist nations also typically use their judiciaries to manipulate or control elections. We are definitely seeing that today. So we can see a lot of these points are showing up here in the United States in many parts of the private West and central bank countries. We are seeing our countries turn into a fascist type of society. And you can see where we are headed. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.